Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Fantasy Fireside with myself, Andy the Remembrancer, and my good friend Colin, or as you may know him, Pancreas No Work. Before we get started today, I've just been ill for a few days, so if you are wondering why my voice sounds a bit scratchy, that's why. But we were looking at the schedule and we thought, it's about time we did another Fantasy Fireside. And the last episode we did, we asked the comments if they had anything in mind in particular. And I believe the overwhelming majority were fans of the Lizardmen. So that's what we're talking about today. I know absolutely nothing about Lizardmen apart from that meme where it's the dog version of the Doge version of Carl Franz going, I hate it when they shout "Bock" at me, and that's my only reference.
And they smoked his fire wizard like a cigar. That's a funny video. Dogehammer 40K for the channel for anyone who's curious.
We'll put it in the description, and I'll put a little bit of it on screen now because I enjoy his videos.
He makes some bangers. But yes, you were correct. Today's the Lizardman. I was kind of surprised that so many people wanted Lizardmen, but for a couple of reasons, I'm not. It's like, I don't know. I'm surprised, but I'm not shocked. Does that make any sense? It's like they weren't the first faction I would have thought everyone wanted, but I get why people like the Lizardmen. For just a brief, what they're all about. Aztec lizards riding dinosaurs, and if that sentence isn't just doesn't conjure up the coolest images of your 5-year-old self playing armies with like your toy soldiers, then you're dead inside, because that's just that's just awesome. What else do you need to say about it?
I mean, from the outside looking in, it does seem like they have a massive appeal because, one, there's like a mystery to them. There's like a lot of, they're obviously very cool looking. They have this really nice aesthetic, but then I guess part of the charm is that they're very alien and unknowable, and that's why the fan base is so into them, perhaps?
That's part of it. They're alien is actually a very apt word in several different ways. Especially, I'll talk about their origin shortly, but also just how they interact with everyone, their mindset. They're very different because everyone else almost everyone else in Warhammer Fantasy has very understandable goals. It's like, even if, you probably don't agree with quite a good number of them, I don't imagine many people are morally thinking, yes, the Dark Elves are in the right for all of that slavery and murder business they do. I doubt many people are on their side. But if you read the lore, you can be like, I understand how you got here. I disagree with all of it, but I get how you got here. Whereas the Lizardmen, it's like, well, that's, you're doing something. I know that, and why you're doing it, at least in the setting, it's like, I don't know why you're doing it. You just seem to be an angry lizard. In the universe, that's how the majority of people understand the Lizardmen. Sigmar, whatever god you worship, only knows what the hell they're up to. But hopefully I can clarify it a bit. So like you said, you don't know anything much about the Lizardmen. Do you have any pre-Fireside questions we can start off with?
Is it the case that a majority of their lore is from the Total Warhammer games?
Not a majority of it. Although Total War did do a couple, maybe not quite substantial, but some pretty noticeable rewriting. I would say in this case it's for the better. For example, I'll discuss it more later, but there's a subspecies called Croxagores. They made them rather more interesting.
It seems like with a few factions in Warhammer Fantasy, Creative Assembly are the vanguard of like, we need to inject some life into this faction, and they seem to be the ones who are very good at like, here's this faction that Games Workshop doesn't talk about anymore. Well, they're in our game, here's some cool stuff about them, like Cathay, for example.
Oh yeah, Cathay is easily the biggest one they've done. Kislev definitely in second place too, because Kislev did have a decent bit of lore. Like it had an army way back in ancient times of Warhammer Fantasy, when 40K was either just starting out or might have not even been around yet. But yeah, Cathay's the big one. And every other faction they've done a couple touching ups on. Like they did the book about Karl Franz's election, for instance, to Emperor.
Oh.
So CA's here, as with most of the factions, they've done a couple new additions to the lore. Lizardmen, I'd say a little bit more than the average faction. Like, they didn't change much about the Empire. They just maybe went into some detail on other bits. But not as much as, say, Cathay, because Cathay's old lore was like 4 paragraphs in an old army book once, and that was the end of it. But yeah, if that's it, are you ready to get into them?
Let's go lizardy. Oh, that sounded wrong. I don't know why he said that.
Well, they are rather lizardy, so apt, if nothing else. So, as most of the Warhammer Fantasy faction's old origin stories go, we return to the, I guess, prehistoric times works. That's actually very fitting for the T-Rex faction. Well, I didn't even word it that way on purpose, and here we are.
Amazing.
To the old ones, those old ones, always in 40k, always in fantasy for the oldest of background lore factions.
Their big chubby cheeks.
Indeed. When they arrived to the Warhammer Fantasy world, we'll call it Malice, because that's what it was named in Age of Sigmar, because the Warhammer world is a bit cumbersome of a name. They were looking for the best way to fight chaos, and they just decided, we're going to make the best way to fight chaos. So they come to the Warhammer Fantasy world, Malice, that I just said I was just going to call Malice. And they do some pretty radical restructuring of the planet. So I don't know if it used to be just like Hoth, but it used to be a lot colder than it is. Well, the old ones, in their infinite wisdom, decided it needed to be moved closer to the sun, and so it was moved closer to the sun.
Amazing.
And as that was done, they then set about doing, I briefly mentioned in the dwarf video, making the various races of the Warhammer world and their effort to find the best one to fight chaos. So, the elves, the dwarves, humanity, ogres, giants even, all that good stuff. But they realized that it would be pretty convenient to have some help while they were doing this. So they made the Lizardmen faction. The Lizardmen, unlike all the other ones, weren't created to be like guided into their role like the other races, like elves and dwarfs. The Lizardmen were created from the get-go to work alongside the old ones and under them in order to make the Warhammer world both properly habitable for the races they created, as well as just do the dirty work, as it were. So what I mean by that is we have the Slann. I know I mentioned in the dwarf video there was one Slann. I think it was Mazdamundi. Remember how I mentioned he could move mountains, and that made the dwarfs quite unhappy when they're living.
Because they live in the mountains. Yeah, I can imagine.
that was a bit of a shock to them. He was a second generation Slann. So the way that works, basically the higher up you go in generations, the stronger you are. The first generation Slann were the one that helped move the planet around with the Lizardmen. And that was their role. The Slann are the magic ones. I'll go a bit more into their races later on after we get past like the origin story. But the rest of them were set out to go build up the temple cities of the Lizardmen to get some sites of like all the ley lines and the other kind of fantasy stuff like that. They sent out the Lizardmen to build sites of power around them where magic was particularly strong. And they also sent them out to exterminate many unknown races that the old ones decided did not fit with their vision for this planet. So we know it's kind of like the Great Crusade in a way, because we know about all these random minor Xeno races in no way beyond, and then the Space Marines killed them. It's the same deal for like the Lizardmen. It's like, yes, these races existed, and then the Lizardmen killed them.
I just like how that started with, they were doing like horticulture and landscaping and janitorial stuff, and then it was genocide. It's like, wait, what did you say? It's like, oh, no, don't worry about that. That was just like a small thing. But they were like sorting out the rivers, and then it's like, can we go back to the bit where they like slaughtered all the people? Oh, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Look how lovely they are, style.
Look, they left some very lovely grasslands in the wake of that civilization they just bulldozed over.
Did they shout "Bok" at the people they killed?
They almost certainly did shout "Bok" at the people they killed. Bok is kind of the standard Saurus noise for everything. It's I don't know. It's like how you can say "God damn" depending on how you intone it. It's like it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's the same thing with Bok. There was only one race that survived these purges. Andy, would you like to take a guess at what race survived?
Was it humanity?
No, it was one. They made humanity. It was one race that they didn't make. This race was already here. And if you like a bit of a further hint, they're an army in Warhammer Fantasy. One race that the Lizardmen just couldn't get rid of, no matter how hard they tried.
The dwarves?
Correct.
No. Oh, the dwarves. I was the only thing is, I was not sure where we are in the timeline between have the Skaven arrived, or the humans still primitive? I'm not sure where we are in the timeline. But I'm assuming ancient times.
Very beginning of the timeline. It was not dwarves. Right. I thought you said orcs, but it was the orcs.
Oh, right.
Even in fantasy, you can't get rid of the orcs. You can cleanse them, you can clean them up. You can't get rid of them. Okay. But yeah, they mostly very successful. Just as we all know, orcs, you can't really get rid of an orc infestation once it's on a planet. Same with fantasy. Once the orcs are on that continent, they're not leaving the continent. You just have to kind of live with that now.
You're just trying to saw the continent off and push it out to see we can't have this anymore. Just push it away.
You go over there.
Hopefully they're not smart enough to build boats. Just keep them on the island. Yeah.
Which I think as much as they couldn't get rid of the orcs, I think 99 out of 100, or however many races were unalived, I think pretty good. Fair enough, Lizardmen. And after that, the various races of the world were created, elves, dwarves, humans, yada, yada, yada. And the Lizardmen helped the Old Ones in guiding them. So, for example, they helped create Ulthuan, the floating island of the elves. They helped make sure that the World's Edge Mountains, where the dwarves lived, was as comfortable as it could be. At least before they decided it needed to be moved later on. They help make the dwarves, have all the minerals you need. Here's the best pocket to mine iron. Here's where you should live for, steel, stuff like that.
Here's a map to all the valuables. Go ham. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Go nuts. And as time went on, the older ones were getting, a little bit worried because the longer they took, the longer it meant that Chaos didn't have to contend with the ultimate weapon race. So they started kind of rushing bits, and it ends with the old ones. Their last project was the ogres, whose habitat and mental facilities, as it were, they were not able to fully finish, which is why ogres are dumb and migratory, because the land that was originally designated for them was not given enough sustainability by the old ones and the Lizardmen. This is all the very origin stuff. What happens next is, as it does so often in Warhammer, Chaos shows up to ruin everything.
Oh no.
So the Old Ones and the Lizardmen at the North and South Poles created these warp gates to ferry supplies back and forth across the planet and from wherever they came from, wherever their great starships came from. And unfortunately, the key words in that was warp gate. Chaos took notice. Just a little bit of a thing about fantasy. There is no origin point for the Chaos Gods in Warhammer Fantasy, which I feel is kind of reflective of it being a fantasy setting. You don't need as much justification as you do in 40k because it's technically sci-fi. It's fantasy. There's 4 evil gods. They've always been around because they're evil gods and you need those. They just suck. So they show up, blow up the warp gates, and demons start pouring in. Well, the old ones look at this and go, well, looks like we failed. We're off. Have a good luck, everyone. Hope you don't die. And sure enough, the old ones returned to their ships and just dipped. They just left. which is a little bit rude. You'd think the captain would go down with the ship, but these captains were completely uninterested in that.
Well, is this the last time we properly see the old ones then? Do they just go from now and we never see them again?
Yeah, yes. At least, like, in terms of, like, the old ones were on the planet directly doing stuff. Yes, this is the last time they're ever.
So they're just somewhere out in the galaxy having fun with another Warhammer-style planet. Like, let's cock this one up as well. It's a bit of fun. It's a weekend. Why not? Like, oh, well done, guys.
For all we knew at the time, yes. The way the end times happen makes it, is a little bit of a tangent, makes it weird. Because I think it used to be the case where, like, the Warhammer Fantasy planet was just, it was a planet, but there were others out there like it. Then the end times happened, and chaos devoured the universe, but all they really took over was, just the Warhammer Fantasy planet, right? So it kind of became a thing, like, with that, it's like, was this one planet? Was the universe just this planet and some stars? Was there more out there? And they ate the rest, but the rest wasn't narratively important, so who cares? Who knows?
For some reason, it's making me think of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where the protagonist, he meets Slarty Bartfast, who's the guy who, like, architected everything. It's like, oh, look, I did a bit of the White Cliffs of Dover. I did them. It's just like, oh, and then he buggered off at one point.
That was the old ones. They shaped the world how they saw fit. Ooh, there's actually a bit about Gottring and Felix I'll get to later. That, of course, relates to the Lizardmen, because of course it does.
We can't have a Fantasy Fireside episode without at least one Gottring and Felix reference.
Look, when you have 18 books and God knows how many short stories, you better believe the setting's going to be thoroughly explored in that series. But for now, old ones left. The Lizardmen and all the other races have a whole lot of demon problems to deal with. So it's time to contend with that. Now, the Lizardmen at the time were basically the only race in any way prepared to deal with this, because they were created to be, of course, to be the servants of the old ones, which means the Slann, even though they're pretty far removed from the old ones' power themselves, they're pretty damn good at magic. If deciding mountains needed to move around wasn't a big enough hint for you that they're quite strong. As well as the more menial laborers, the Skink, Saurus, and Kroxigor. Pretty damn strong, pretty good at fighting, even if they weren't necessarily directly designed for that. They're giant lizard people. You better believe if they hit you with a stick, that stick is going to hurt. Mm-hmm. So they set about fighting. The only real quote-unquote allies they had in the matter was essentially the High Elves, because the dwarfs, in proper dwarf fashion, saw everything that was going on and just shut the door on their holds and were like, well, good luck, everyone. We do not care. we are hiding.
I've got my ale. I'm going for some like rubies in the depths. We're going to have a couple of pints afterwards, and I'm going to have a nap. I'm going to have a Sunday roast. You enjoy the fighting. Yeah, we're fine where we are.
Sorry to hear about all that. Good luck with it. All of them except Grimnir. Yeah, Grimnir went to the Chaos Gates itself and...
Is this pre or after they've already had their like mountains moved around by the Slann?
This is pre. So this is
that
was like
so they're just being dicks. Okay,
I'll get to that a little bit more. I'll explain why the Slann decided to just move the mountains. Yeah, this is pre. It was only the High Elves, because the High Elves they did have some armies at this point, but they were completely untested. Because they lived in the Garden of Eden. The armies were just kind of there because, the old ones were creating all these races as weapon races. But they hadn't fought anything yet because, again, there was no infighting. They
chuck some Chardonnay at him. Go on. Maybe it'll do something. Well, that wasn't very effective. Oh, well.
Basically that. The Lizardmen were the only, like, proper warriors and soldiers on the planet. The High Elves, after some time, did kick things into high gear. They eventually remembered, right, we need to figure this out fast. But the Lizardmen did the bulk of the fighting, elf simp that I am, I have to admit. And it was just, like, across the planet, billions of lizards and T-Rexes and alligators and just everything fighting against, like, the entire armies of, like, the four at once. So, say, you're taking a trip, to where the Empire Bretonnia is today. You wouldn't find Imperials and, stupid horse people. What you would find is a billion Saurus and a billion demons of all the Chaos Gods just going at it. And this was 100 years long period of just the planet being covered in lizards and demons duking it out, which, in a way, it's kind of like the Warhammer Fantasy War in Heaven, and that it's larger than anything the setting had before, and we don't have too much information on it because it's a background detail.
I like Lizards and Demons as like a Dungeons and Dragons alternative. Like, stop playing that. This is the new hotness. Lizards and Demons. It's great fun.
That's the version they have in the Empire. That's what they have in Altdorf. Eventually, the High Elves concoct a bit of an idea to build a vortex that would drain magic from the world, and it would be the Elven mages who keep it going and would form it, but unbeknownst to most people in the Warhammer world, except for a very select few High Elf mages, such as those who designed it, and a couple of those in modern times like Teclis, the Lizardmen provided a pretty substantial portion of the magical energy they needed to kickstart that so things could get going. So you can thank the Lizardmen and the Elves for letting this wargame exist, because they were fighting and dying for it. So as that's
By the way,
oh.
Before we go any further, are the Lizardmen like sentient, or are they more like a hive mind? Do they have personalities, or are they more just like programmed soldiers?
I'll cover a bit more on that once we're done with the... But you know how Tyranid organisms are made for a purpose?
Oh, yeah.
It's like that, but they are all sentient. There's no hive mind. They all have individual, like, sapience and stuff. But, like, a Saurus is the standard foot soldier. They're all their own Saurus, but all Saurus, like, are pre-programmed to be warriors and soldiers and generals that live long enough.
Okay.
It's, I guess, if anything, they're, like, clone troopers, kind of. Or it's like, they're all individuals. There's no, like, Republic hive mind for the clone troopers, but they're all going to be pretty damn similar.
Yeah. For some reason, my mind thinks of, like, the, what are they called in the first Mass Effect game? The Keepers, which are, like, made... They're a race of kind of insectoid creatures that are created to maintain the Citadel, and no one can communicate with them. They ignore everything around them, and they just function to upkeep this massive, like, hub for the galaxy.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, the Lizardmen, do they have I know they like shouting "Bok," which shows they have a bit of personality, but is it also like running subroutine shout "Bok," then carve up that enemy? Or do I have a name like Philip and I have friends? Like, is that a thing with the Lizardmen?
So the Slann kind of have personality. Again, there a lot of them are pretty similar with it, but like there are some standouts. As for the rest of them, it's like the longer they live, they'll probably gain some personality quirks. Early on, like straight out of they spawn from spawning pools, straight out of those. It's kind of like a Saurus is a Saurus is a Saurus. Sure, one of them might prefer spears, one of them might like clubs, but you can. The average Saurus is going to be the same as the average Saurus from another temple city, another spawning pool. They do have characters that are a bit different. One of the Slann I'll talk about later is actually pretty radical departure from what the average Slann is like, but for the most part, they're pretty interchangeable from each other.
Okay.
So Vortex is up, magic being drained away, and the way it works is as long as there's any magic around, demons can just form in Warhammer Fantasy. They don't necessarily need a gateway like an unprotected Psyker, as in 40k. Definitely helps if there's an untrained wizard around. It makes it a lot easier to get in, but they don't need it. So with the Vortex, the Lizardmen and the Elves made, demons are kind of... Obviously, they're not just gone. That would be way too much to hope for. But they're kind of confined to the northern southern poles, where the old warp gates of the old ones were. Now they're used to bring demons and chaos and magic into the world. So, mission accomplished, kind of. Chaos still a problem and the old ones are gone, but at least it's no longer the apocalypse. Except the Lizardmen have probably more problems than anyone else in the aftermath of the massive demon invasion, which probably saying a bit. So what happened is, I mentioned how there's like the generations of Slann. The first generation died to a man. So the strongest, the most powerful of the Lizardmen mages, they're just gone. One of them is kind of still around, sort of like the Emperor. He's dead, but didn't quite get the memo. But he's not up and about, like, actively doing things anymore. They kind of just cart his body out, and he does magic. That would be Lord Croak. I'll talk more about him later, because he is a treat. If I remember correctly, there was either only one second-generation Slann, or at least by the time of modern fantasy, there was only one second-generation Slann left, Lord Mazdamundi. And there was no longer the billions and billions of Lizardmen that once were, that were able to march across the planet and get rid of the races the old ones didn't like. No longer quite got those numbers. And to make things worse, their spawning pools were destroyed. So how Lizardmen are formed is, like, there's no mommy and daddy Lizardmen. They're all just, like, genderless meat robots. They come out of spawning pools. A whole lot of them were tainted by chaos, and only the old ones knew how to make more of the things. Maybe the first generation ones also did, but they're all dead, so it's a moot point either way.
Are they basically like a cleaner version of the Uruk-hai, where you see them in the first Lord of the Rings and they're just like tearing them out of pods? And I know the Uruk-hai are elves that transform, but it's just like, and the Lizardmen are just like in this sack, and then you go plop, and there's a Lizardman.
Well, it's like there's these, they're just like spawning pools of, like, I don't know, Lizardman goop, and they just walk out of them fully formed. So yeah,
larvae.
Just 1 minute it is a nice clean pond. The next minute 1,000 Saurus just walked out of the damn thing.
Why is the pond shouting Bok? I don't understand.
It's and that is a obviously very big problem. It's kind of like space. Actually, I imagine it's kind of like when you attack a Space Marine recruiting world, right? Space Marines don't like that. So that's the same thing with the Lizardmen. This is how you make more Lizardmen, except unlike the Space Marines, you can't just pick up and go to another world if you really need to. You have your spawning pool, and if that goes away or is corrupted, sucks to be you. No more Lizardmen coming out of that one.
You can't just rip an organ out of a Lizardman and then go, right, we'll make a new Lizardman out of this pig or whatever. It's like, no, once it's dead, it's dead. No more spawning pools. Shame.
And just the cherry on top of the cake is the Slann spawning pools are all completely gone. So there are no more Slann ever being made, which means they're now a completely finite resource. A very powerful resource that, to be fair, can magically unmake whoever tries to bother them. But this is Warhammer. Doesn't matter how powerful you are on the chopping block if push comes to shove.
One day you are on the chopping block.
One day you're going to stop rolling sixes, and when that day comes. So they're in a rough state. And especially because the old ones are gone, they're kind of lost, because obviously they're created to be the servants of the old ones. Well, the old ones are gone, and they're just kind of left to their own devices. And this gets into what I was talking about earlier. The question you asked with the Lizardmen moving the mountains. Why did they do that? Well, what happened was they kind of consolidate in Lustria. It's always been like their main base, Warhammer South America. But now, except for a few outposts elsewhere on the planet, such as the Southlands in Warhammer Africa, this is pretty much the only place you're going to find Lizardmen anymore. So they consolidate there, and they look at the great plan of the old ones, because the old ones were a little bit more proactive in fantasy than 40k. They left behind their cliff notes on how to handle the Warhammer world going forward. Etched on tablets of gold, because they're all in the jungle, and gold doesn't tarnish, unlike everything else they could have used to write it down on. They left behind instructions on basically what to do with the planet going forward. It is not perfect, both because the old ones themselves are no longer around to make changes as things come up or just clarify something, but it's, to the Lizardmen, better than anything else, and they become sort of like gods to the Lizardmen, the old ones that left. And so they look at the great plan and they figure out, all right, how are we going to handle things going forward? Again, it's horribly incomplete. It's a actually, I'm surprised with how many apt comparisons to like the Imperium I'm making with the Lizardmen, but it's like a STC fragments. It's
Okay.
like you find one, no way it's going to be like just a whole SDC, right? It's not going to be like, oh, you found the complete record of Dark Age technology. Welcome to the new Renaissance. No, it's like how, like a guardsman finds like a blueprint for a combat knife or something like
Here
that.
is half of a spoon, and then like just the tip of like the barrel of a las gun, and then like just the teeth for a new kind of chainsaw. And you're like, this is useless unless I have everything else. Oh, typical.
Yeah, it's like that. It's like they have to piece together these fragments and go forward like, okay, we need to fix the world now more urgently than ever. So that becomes the guiding force of the Lizardmen. That's, in fact, why the Slann moved the mountains, because they were looking at the Great Plan. They were meditating on it and realized that the mountains, the World's Edge Mountains, needed to be moved a little bit over to the side. And so they just did. Which is, incidentally, how the Lizardmen interact with other races. They're not evil. In fact, I'd even say most of them are like, not malicious, not evil. They're biological robots, like I was saying. They all, like, some of them will have personalities, especially if they live long enough. But they have their purpose, and none of them are going to like deviate from that purpose. Like, there's no Lizardman who's ever fallen to chaos. There's no Lizardman who, you can bribe them to look the other way while you're ransacking.
There's no ego to exploit. They're just all function.
Yeah, it's like, even, they gain a personality, like or dislike certain things more than another. It's like, this is his purpose, and he's going to do it, and whether or not you are in the way is purely inconsequential to them.
Yeah.
So that's their guiding principles going forward. The mountains needed to be moved. Sorry, dwarves, the old one's great plan, at least what we think it is, has dictated that you need to be moved, whether you like it or not.
And I'm assuming they don't have diplomats or anyone who goes like, I'm going to just warn you. They're just like, no, we're just going to do it straight away. No worries.
That's one of those things Total War kind of actually did expand on a little bit.
Okay.
The weakest Lizardmen, called the Skink, they're like the what is it, like the merchant and like craftsman's class, for lack of a better word.
Okay.
So they'll do a lot of they'll do some like trading with other races a little bit, not frequently, because the Lizardmen are very isolationist.
There we go. It's the merchant from Resident Evil 4 confirmed was a Lizardman. It's just like, what are you buying?
Yeah. So occasionally they do interact with other races. Sometimes just like, for example, they want gold, not because they care about like value of gold like other races do, right? But because, like I was saying earlier, gold doesn't tarnish, and because they live in a jungle, paper is not a good idea. So like they might trade things for gold to get more stuff to write down on, but they don't really conduct diplomacy so much as Lizardmen just kind of happen in your area of the world because for whatever reason the Great Plan is dictated.
Just like a news anchor in the Empire, like, Lizardmen spotted, moving all this stuff over here. No idea why. Just try and go around, avoid them at all costs.
Yeah.
They're not malicious. They're just going to get it done, or you're going to be in the way.
Yeah, please do not be in the way. It's going to lead to problems.
Please do not feed the Lizardmen.
Yeah. And that becomes, so the Skink, if they do like any kind of diplomacy, would largely be done through the Skinks. Maybe like top tier, like techless level elven mage might talk to the Slann indirectly, briefly, like that. But the Skink are like kind of like the face of the Lizardmen as far as the average person who interacts with them would be concerned. At least in non-fighting terms. If you're fighting Lizardmen, the face of them is the Saurus, who are going to cave your head in. So, yeah, that becomes how they interact with the world. The Slann themselves, what they do is they go to sleep for centuries at a time and meditate on the plan of the old ones. Which, because as I said, they have incomplete fragments. They want to think on the Great Plan and make sure we're doing it right. Clearly something went wrong because demons were everywhere and they're still around.
Yeesh.
We got to make sure we do it right. It's especially like paralyzing to them. They'll spend centuries completely without moving, just meditating. Because again, they were the servants of the old ones. They want to make sure they're doing it to the letter. Because they don't have all the information, they want to spend as much time as possible making sure they get it right.
And they endure so much cramp. It's unbelievable. Just waking up from that, like, everything hurts.
I imagine if they weren't magic, that would probably just kill them. The constant cramping. It's like, they cast like dull pain or something. It's like, okay, I can't feel them. I can't feel.
Cast anti-cramp level 5.
All right, I can't feel the cramps for another 500 years. I'm going back to the nap time chamber.
Perfect.
Yeah, and in the meantime, the other Warhammer races kind of, spread out, do their thing. Humanity over the years. You get the Tomb King, the rise and fall of them, Nagash, all that. The Empire crops up. The dwarves and elves have their great empires that then fall. All that stuff. Dark elves happen the whole time.
Skaven, yes.
Skaven, yes. And actually, that becomes one of the driving forces of the Lizardmen to march out to war instead of just meditating. They sit, they think. Every few centuries, they'll go out and build some magical monument or go fight a battle at X location. But saying passive doesn't quite feel right because they do things, and it's because they're trying to follow the plan to the letter. But because of that, like you can go one year, it might be like just Lizardmen apocalypse, like every faction of the world is dealing with like swarms of them at their doors because they've decided something big needs to happen now, and then that can be followed by like 200 years of complete silence coming out of Lustria.
Like restrained yet calculated slaughter. Like we're dormant, but then when we're ready, it's gonna hurt.
Yeah, and that's kind of the attitude they have. Until like the leading centuries up into modern day Warhammer Fantasy, because of what the other races are doing. Now you brought them up. I think I'll discuss the Skaven. Yes. So what happened with the Skaven and the Lizardmen is, Skaven, as they do, they dig tunnels. They decided to tunnel under the entire ocean, all the way to Lustria, for reasons, Skaven reasons, no doubt. Lord only knows why.
Someone was digging that way and that way and that way, so we went the other way and we ended up here. That's probably all it was.
Probably. That's you don't need to overthink it with grand reasons for the Skaven. They needed more space and there was no one in this direction, so they went that way. They pop up in Lustria and they make quite a mess of the place, especially because this is the rise of Skaven clan Pestilence. I believe we talked about them a bit in our Skaven Beginner to Expert. Make sure to go watch that. These are the Skaven who are followers of the Great Horned Rat in guise of like pestilence and decay. Kind of Nurgly, but like Nurgle, Nurgle loves his followers, right? Horned Rat doesn't. Like Nurgle followers genuinely like, do correct me if I'm wrong, but at least some of them genuinely think like, hey, this is grandfather's love, and we got to spread it, right?
Oh, yeah. There's plenty of guys in the Death Guard who are like, I love being a stinky, don't feel any pain. Yes, my organs are on the floor, but I don't feel it, so it's fine. Yeah. I'm 1,000+ years old. I'm having a great time. Look at the little nurgling I've got. I'm going to give him a squish in his belly. It's brilliant.
Yeah, they genuinely think spreading all that, gift of plague and crap is good stuff. Skaven don't. They know they're the worst. They know they're disgusting and gross, and they don't care. And they're going to make you disgusting and gross because it ruins things, and that's all the more Brad cares.
Fueled by bitterness and spite. And that's it.
Yep. So those guys arrive in Lustria and begin making it horrible because, of course, they do. What I didn't mention too much about is part of the reason they left Lustria is because of the Lizardmen. Not just because, they wanted to return to the rest of Skavendon and take power, but because the Lizardmen kicked them out. So how this happened is that as there were pestilence, the Skaven were clan pestilence, they invaded Lustria, completely destroyed one temple city, messed up a couple spawning pits, so that's, again, less Lizardmen going to be added from here on out. And, not a fan. Not a fan of that. So what happened is Lizardmen, of course, go to fight, but they can't quite push the Skaven out because they're Skaven. Pretty hard to do that. But something rather interesting happened. So the belief of the Lizardmen is that the old ones were basically gods. It's kind of weird. It's like how, like the closest once again is how like Space Marines revere and worship the Emperor. Most of them don't quite worship them as gods. It's like that, just like a little bit closer to them all believing they're gods. It's kind of weird, like where that, like they fall on that scale of are they gods, are they not gods? But the old ones weren't born of belief or anything, right? The Lizardmen, or the Skinks, however, managed to make a god in the more quote-unquote traditional Warhammer sense. Their beliefs coalesced into the god known as Sotek, the only Lizardman deity that is not an old one. He's a great serpent, and with him and the belief of the Skinks, they drove Clan Pestilens out of Lustria. I think it was even Sotek like drove the last few remaining ones of them into the sea and drove them back to the old world. So, hey, Skaven are gone, right? That's positive. And the Lizardmen get a new god, which naturally the Slann are all thinking like, dear God, what is this thing? This is not part of the Great Plan. What the hell are you? Is this good? Is this bad? We don't know. And that's another like hint into why I said they're alien. Like most people, like, you're an average citizen in the Empire, right? A new god shows up and smites like a bunch of beastmen. You're like, hey, this guy's pretty cool. Hey, another god to worship. We don't, we like Sigmar the best, but hey, you can come too. We'll sacrifice a pig in your name every now and then. The Slann, this is not part of the Great Plan, but it helped. So they're completely like paralyzed in how to deal with this. We're like, what are you? Are you friendly? You're different. You're not supposed to be here. The Skink are big fans of them, but the other Lizardmen are like, I don't know how to feel about that.
The Codex Scalates does not approve this action because we don't know what it is.
It did basically that. The Slann are all Leandros. It's not by the book, so they know what to do. But what did come about from that is the Lizardmen now hate Skaven more than demons. Because they showed up, all of the systems they had in place to deal with demons just didn't work, because Skaven aren't demons, they're rats. So, because of that, and because demons aren't, technically part of the Great Plan, right? Because it's all to fight against chaos. The Skaven are this completely unrelated to anything they have threat that showed up and ruined things more than anyone else has, since, like that great war in heaven and fantasy thousands of years ago. So, they're not fans of the Skaven. So, between that, that was like kind of step one of getting the Lizardmen a bit more active, so you can have them as, as an army in the war game, justify whether going to fight the Empire. What also happened is that the Warhammer, like in like our world, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. The age of exploration begins. So Imperial colonies, Norskins even, some dark elves, high elves, a little bit of everyone, suddenly starts showing up on Lustria. And kind of like in our own world, where people got the idea in their head that there's cities of gold, everyone in the Warhammer Fantasy world starts getting that idea in their head, except in Warhammer Fantasy, there actually were cities practically made of gold the Lizardmen had. And naturally, everyone else is like, that's a city of gold. I want some of that gold. So they start forming colonies and exploring Lustria, like, conquistadors. And the Lizardmen don't like that, because you're messing with the Great Plan. They need that gold to write stuff down and read it. And suddenly, all of these stupid warmbloods are showing up and stealing the gold. So between that and Skaven and all of them just, like, these more and more threats coalescing and becoming problems, the Lizardmen start to realize they need to be more active. They need to actually get out and doing things. So what happens is, I mentioned it before, Lord Mazdamundi, the last second-generation Slann by this point, he has the radical idea to only spend decades at a time meditating instead of centuries, which I know, please hold your outrage. I know this is just something absurd. but he starts leading the old ones, and this is one of those things. It might have always been in lore, but Total War definitely kind of or might have always been in Warhammer, but Total War definitely kind of made it a bit more certain. He kind of determined how the Lizardmen need to handle things going forward. Obviously, fight chaos wherever you see it, but sometimes the great plan. You got to be a bit more proactive with it. You can't always think on it. Sometimes you just got to act on the scraps we have, right? So he starts going out and about and actually leading armies and fighting and doing stuff like that. Like especially Dark Elves are one of the main enemies they fight. Just not necessarily for any ideological reasons, just because Dark Elves have Warhammer North America, Lizardmen have Warhammer South America. Just kind of
it was a war of proximity,
thing.
That's all.
Yeah, it's a distance thing. And one of the plans of Lizardmen going forward becomes, we're not going to kill everyone, but the old ones all gave you specific locations that you need to be in. So all of the elves, Wood Elves and Dark Elves included, should be on Ulthuan. So they might, every now and then, they might suggest to some High Elven colonies outside of Ulthuan or the Dark Elves, maybe you should go back to Ulthuan.
You've broken the Soros curfew. Time to get back into the boats and back where you're from.
Indeed.
Or we're going to make you.
Yeah.
Bok, bok, bok.
And then when they say no, they break out the T-Rexes. Yeah, that becomes one of their things. Like, dwarves belong in the mountains? Well, dwarves, I know you're good friends with the Empire. You shouldn't be living in the Empire. You should go back to your mountain home. I don't care that we moved it 50 feet.
I don't care that you have a passport. Go back there.
I understand we blew up your living room because the mountains needed to be moved. Get back in there and clean it up then, buddy.
And the dwarves are like, well, we wouldn't have gone outside if you idiots hadn't moved our mountains. They're like, no, it's in the book. We have to do it. Put the gold down. That's our gold. They're just so petty.
Yeah. So they start going out to do that, and also a little bit of some reclaiming lost old ones in Lizardmen temple cities. One example, and the one I was going to bring up earlier with Gotrek and Felix, is Albion, which is Warhammer England.
Hey.
Although it's like the in Warhammer, it's like the fantasy. It's like Celtic, Druidic stereotype style of England. So they've got these big, stone circles, like Stonehenge, except there's a bunch of them, and these magical ley lines and stuff like that.
Like dolmens.
Yeah, they've got their own shamanistic magic that's not quite like the others, stuff like that. There's one of many ley lines there that the Lizardmen and the old ones set up ancient years past. They aren't too involved in this, but there's two ways that you show it's Lizardmen. One is that in Total War, that's where one of the legendary lords starts. Oh my god, I'm forgetting his name. I'm partially forgetting his name because he's a complete nothing. He's
just a lizard robot. Oh, who cares?
He's Nakai the Wanderer. Oh my god, that.
There you go.
He starts there in Total War. If you ever want to play his campaign and be horrendously miserable because his campaign sucks. Oh, Nakai, poor guy. But yeah, he starts there because he's there to fix things up for the Lizardmen and get it back to snuff. And Gotrek and Felix go there with Teclis, the good old elf wizard Teclis. Because the old ones also built a webway in Warhammer Fantasy, because they just seem to like doing that, and it's sure enough dangerous, spooky in there, better than going through the warp. Connects all the Warhammer Fantasy world, even if a lot of it's damaged, and so they go there to kind of fix it and prevent chaos from completely sinking Ulthuan, I believe it was. So Lizardmen artifacts become sort of this, in many ways, plot device, ways to get some adventures going, as well as the reasons the Lizardmen are now going out and actually interacting with the world again. And that kind of becomes where they lead up to in modern Warhammer Fantasy, where they're more active alongside everyone else. It's time to finally fight, get out there. Can't keep meditating for centuries. We got to do stuff.
Dad, wake up! The Skaven are back. Oh, not again!
God damn it. So I'll really quick. I'll cover the Any questions? I'm going to cover like the spawning, like the different types of lizardmen and what their roles are, and then I'll do a couple little fun facts, and then I'll move on to the end times.
So the only thing is, you mentioned about how was it they have like a kind of stronghold on Albia? Are they like working with the humans that live there because they're staying where they're supposed to, and it's got the ley line, or is it just in Total War games he just happens to the warlord happens to be based there? Like, do they have like alliances with humans and other species if they're quote doing as they're supposed to be doing?
They don't not they a little of a spoiler alert. In Age of Sigmar, they do kind of have alliances in some ways.
Okay,
But in Warhammer Fantasy, the closest they have to an alliance is they show up to like fight chaos, and there's an army already fighting chaos. They'll fight alongside each other, and then the lizardmen leave.
yeah, like the Empire just like all the Norskins fighting chaos, and the Lizardmen turn just the one that just goes, look at that thing. Nature is amazing.
Shit, that was that.
Kills loads of the stuff.
Yeah. With Albion, I think it's kind of a hint in like Gotchic and Felix that those, like the humans there, were sort of like servants to the lizardmen, and the way the lizardmen were servants to the Slann.
Mm-hmm.
And when the lizardmen left, like the humans there in Albion are like following the cliff notes of the cliff notes on how to keep the ley lines and stuff going.
Just like pocketing gold, putting in a special hoard so when they come back, like, my lizard friends, we've been doing as you said, we've been drawing you on the walls. Look at this like teeth necklace I made. I took that from one of your ancestors. I thought it was quite chic. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's just so isolated and out of the way for every faction, let alone just the lizardmen, who again are coming from South America all the way to England in terms of distance. And it's like, we can't really do too much to help you, but good job, because that's a very important place when it comes to like the magical ley lines and all that stuff. So good job, humans. You're not doing it too poorly. Nice. It's even it goes a bit more into how the old ones shaped the world, because there's since like Felix and Teclis were talking about how the old ones shaped the world, and Felix proposes the idea that maybe like, because Teclis found like a map, well, like a kind of like a depiction of Albion, and he's like, well, this is nothing like Albion is. This is completely worthless now. This must be like thousands of years ago how it looked. And Felix proposes, after he talked to Teclis for a bit, he's like, maybe this is how the old ones planned it to be. So after like, millennia, Albion will look like this. So the lizardmen of the old ones are perfectly capable of the long-term game, if the centuries meditating didn't clue you off already. Yeah, so there's that. Spawning pools, right? That's what I was going to talk about, and the casts. So, for I feel like I've been saying Slann, Saurus, Skink, all that for a while. How about a bit of clarification on what exactly those means? So they have sort of a caste system. It's weird because Tau. I'll start with that. Tau, right? They have their caste system. Like, you're born into it. This is what you're designed to do. Every now and then, you'll get a little hint of lore. It's like, man, maybe I don't want to be a fire caste warrior. It's like, well, too bad.
I can't read. Why am I in this cast?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's like kind of like that, except again, the lizardmen aren't pre-programmed biological robots to do whatever caste they form into. So they don't complain about their caste system or anything like that. It's not an oppressive caste system. It's like, you were designed to do this, so you're gonna do this.
Yeah, not like a Tyranid going like, I'm in the wrong hive fleet.
Yeah.
So what do you mean? Like, oh, I'm not. No, I feel like I should be in Leviathan. It's like, no, you were literally genetically modified to be in this hive fleet. Go back and eat the Ultramarines. Do it. Yeah, that's what you're supposed to be doing.
I'm in a Behemoth Splinter fleet, but I feel like I should have been in Kraken. It's like, no, not how it works. It's like that. So at the top, you have the Slann. As I said, the best mages in the Warhammer world, the first generation Slann, who are mostly all gone except for kind of one guy. They're all gone, but they were easily the strongest magic users in the Warhammer world. And I'm like moving the planet around at a whim, creating miniature stars of a people's head on the battlefield, which is as deadly as that sounds. There's no coming back from that one. They were pretty much unstoppable. They were like the direct servants of the Old Ones. They would talk to them the most, which is part of why when they all died, it was especially crippling, because Old Ones are gone, and the people who talk to the Old Ones are all gone. This is a problem. You get to the second generation, who are not quite as powerful, but they're still the ones who, move the mountains around and all of that stuff. So it's kind of like going like, one heavyweight champion isn't as strong as the other heavyweight champion. If you or me tried to fight them, I don't know. I don't know how good you do jujitsu, right?
Yeah, but I mean,
I don't know how good you are.
If you're fighting a super heavyweight or a heavyweight, if they punch you in the face, it's probably going to be a similar outcome, especially for me. It's like, I'm not a heavyweight.
I don't know how good you are at jiu-jitsu. I'm assuming if either of us, tried to fight like Floyd Mayweather versus Mike Tyson or someone like that,
it wouldn't work.
It's going to be the same outcome either way. One of them, sure, maybe not technically as hard of a hitter. Doesn't matter at a certain point. My jaw
doesn't matter if they hit you in the right place in your jaw. You're going down, or in like the like, is it the sternum, where somewhere on the chest, where if you get punched in a certain place, your body like kind of goes into shock and it just flops over like a dead fish, and you're like, yeah, that's not liver punch. I think it is. Reset. Yeah.
It's like that level of power. It's like, yeah, technically the first generation way stronger. And as far as the average person cares, doesn't matter. That's the second generation Slann. The last one left is Lord Mazdamundi, the first character I'll talk about. He's the one I was saying is radical. He actually wants to go out and do things on the regular, not just every 500 years as the plan dictates. So he's the Slann who most interacts with the people of the Warhammer world. He's also the one who put that policy of get back in your goddamn home into place. So his interactions are usually not positive. He even gets a bit of a diplomatic penalty in Total War because he's not a friendly fella. Some fun facts about him. There was one time a dark elf invasion into Lustria that Mazdamundi solved by just willing a mountain range into existence. So there was a nice, easy to crossing into Lustria, and then there was mountains. Just 1 second there weren't, 1 second the next there was. So this is the power, the Dragon Ball Z power level we're working with of the Slann. Of course you go down the generations, they do get weaker, but again, it's like the fighter comparison I was making. It's like,
yeah.
Unless
or like Final Fantasy, like he can't cast Ultima anymore, but he's still got a bunch of spells that will just deck you. And you're there with your like stick, or you're there with your musket with like one shot that's not even going to damage him, and then it takes you like 20 minutes to reload. Like, yeah, it doesn't matter. You're still outclassed.
Yeah, it's like, oh no, he can only cast like the most destructive firestorm I've ever seen. What a weakling. It does trickle down, like, as you get to, like, the third and fourth generation, you do get a few exceptional standouts, like, amongst, like, the elves, very few rare humans, some dwarven rune magic can equal these generation Slanns. But again, for the most part, they're still very powerful mages. It doesn't matter if one guy on your side can equal them, that one guy's probably not around.
Yeah, like, your very best possible magician is probably barely as good as our worst. Like, cool. And we've got like a few more. Yeah.
It's like the Custodes champions. It's like, I'm sure, like, Karn is probably equal to some Custodes, right? Well, there's one Karn, and he's not here, is he? So it doesn't really matter now, does it? So that's the Slann. They're the leaders, the people who decode and carry out the great plan, getting more active as Mazdamundi kind of kicked them into high gear. Then you go down to the Saurus. They are the generals of whatnot, and the basic grunt foot soldiers. As they live longer, they become better and better warriors. And then the few of them that live long enough, like hundreds of years, they'll become like the generals, kind of like chapter masters, as it were.
And to quote Carl Franz, the Doge edition, I hate Soros. I hate them.
They're the frontline muscle of the Lizardmen. the worst mistake you can make is thinking, oh, they have stupid like primitive obsidian clubs and whatnot, like scale armor. This will be done no problem. They're 8 feet tall and built out of like pure pectoral muscle. Doesn't matter that technically, like, Imperial steel is more advanced. You're gonna die. That thing's gonna club you to death. Which is one of the reasons that there's not very many colonies in Lustria. It's because when the Saurus come knocking, very few things on the Warhammer planet are actually going to be able to stand up to them. And indeed, that's part of why I've been making so many Imperium comparisons. They're very comparable to Space Marines, in that they're completely loyal to the Slann and the Old Ones in the same way Space Marines indoctrinated, completely loyal to the Imperium and the Emperor.
Yeah. There's no reason to retreat because they've only got one single-minded objective, and that's to do what they're told. It's like they're not walking away. They're just going to keep going forward until they're either dead or they get it done.
Yeah.
And look at those muscles, those big scaly muscles. Hot damn.
And
Jeez.
The Lizardmen shall know no fear. I always think of I'll see if I can find it, but it's my favorite image of the Lizardmen is it's the loading screen for their faction in Total Warhammer. It's this is what you get to see when the Lizardmen march to war. There's a reason that even though they have done zero advancement in like the 5,000 years of the setting.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar with that image with the T-Rexes and the big scythes. Like, just walking towards you like you're in trouble.
Yeah, it's like, I understand you have a gun. Look at me. It's it's like you take the power armor away from a Space Marine, he's still gonna kill that guardsman right over there. So yeah, that's the Saurus. They do gain personality as they live, but they all still have that same single-minded objective they're formed for, which is to fight in the name of the Old Ones and the Slann. Some characters for them are Gorak, the albino Saurus. He was so I think actually what that used to be is you could give Lizardman characters marks from each of the Old Ones, and you could give them one mark that was the extra expensive one that gave you the best buffs, which was you were blessed by all the Old Ones. And that kind of got reworked into Gorak being like the one super special character blessed by all the Old Ones, the Albinosaurus. He's a murder machine. Take one of those guys in the front, give him white scales and a jade club and shield, and just tell him to go ham. And he does. He is a absolutely brutal killing machine. And in Total War, he even starts with the last first generation Slann in his army, who gets to make suns above people's head. So wow. He's quite the fun campaign.
He's very much the caption, the Saurus, told not to worry about, like, oh, don't worry about him. It's like, he's the one you got to watch out for. He's the one who's a bit different and for good reason.
Yeah, he's pretty brutal. There's also his name is Krotgar, another Saurus. I'll send an image of him. He rides a T-Rex mount and has a laser hand.
Oh wow, a laser hand. Where'd you get that from? This is fantasy. That's not allowed. That's cheating. That's sci-fi.
Kind of like how Yarrick got his arm cut off, so he just jammed a power claw on it. I believe that happened to him, except he jammed a Lizardman artifact onto the stump, and now he's got that.
So you're confirming for all the listeners that he is the Sebastian Yarrick of Warhammer Fantasy. Just putting it out there.
Kinda, yeah. Not the worst way to look at it. Except if what is it? If Yarrick had like a Squigoth mount.
That'd be cool.
Which, the Fortress of Arrogance, very cool and a very good name for something. I mean, that is top tier. But I have to say, I think it would be much funnier if he was riding a giant squig in a battle against the orc.
Just with his big claw rays going, "Come here, you orc bugger! I'm gonna cut your face off."
Yeah, he's very cool. He's called the last defender of Hexawatl, I believe, because when it was invaded, I can't remember if it's by demons or Skaven, one of those two, and him and his Saurus spawning pools held to the last. And there was a couple, like I think maybe like 100 of them or something like that left. And over just the centuries, Gorok became the last surviving, or pardon me, Krotgar became the last surviving one. And he's the last defender of Hexawatl. He's I know at least in Total War he starts in the Southlands to give you a bit of a different start. So if you'd rather fight orcs instead of Skaven, he's your lizard for that.
And for his efforts in surviving, Rabute Gilliman gifted him a new regiment of Primaris Lizardmen, and now he's back on top. I'm guessing with the spawning pods, he just went like, right, we've won, refresh, we can rebuild.
Yeah, it's like, let's get going again, fellas.
Something special in the pools, like, oh, make them a bit chunkier, just put some like Tabasco in or something, just make them a bit spicier. Yeah, that's what we want.
It's yeah, that's him. And now that's the Saurus. We move to the third major one. There's one more after them, the Skinks. So those are those little smaller lizards next to the big ones in the picture. They're like the craftsmen of the Lizardmen. It's like the Slan will dictate what needs to be carved into the plaque. They're big, unwieldy, fat frogmen. So it's the Skink who do the carving, and anything out of marble. They build the cities. They do stuff like that. And the rare occasions the Lizardmen actually trade with other races, that's the Skink's job. That's what they're up to. That's what they do. They're also, in terms of battle, like frontline. Like they're not frontline. They're like skirmishers. So they're like light infantry. They they'll go on the flank, get behind them, or they'll throw like javelins and stuff and toss them at them. That's what they kind of do. They're cool. They're obviously not the strongest, not the main line, but they're still big lizard people. And when you invade Lustria, well, the first line of defense is Lustria itself because it's Katakan, but just a continent, not a planet. The second line of defense is like Skink, who are fighting like the lizard Viet Cong.
They're chucking shooting arrows and throwing spears and making traps for you and being a bit sneaky.
Poison blowguns and stuff that are just
picking you off. Like very Aztec.
Yeah, they're very like the stereotypical view of the Aztec. Granted, probably not most historically accurate, but this is Warhammer. Very little of the historical inspirations are 1-to-1. To be generous with it. So the Skink they're clever little bastards. There's two major characters. One of them is Tehenowin, or Teeny Weeny, as he is known in the Total War community.
Teeny Weeny, oh, that's precious.
He's like the prophet of Sotek. So he's it's kind of the end of it. He's the prophet of Sotek. He's all that entails. That's him. In Total War, he can cause every Lizardman faction to declare war on every Skaven faction because it is time to clean house.
Nice.
His campaign also sucks because he gets everything everyone else already has, except he has to unlock it.
Oh.
They kind of drop the ball. CA drops the ball on the Lizardmen a lot. Is an unfortunate trend. Next is Tic-Tac-Toe, because a lot of the Lizardman names are puns. He's a skink who rides a pterodactyl and throws bombs at people down below him. Not too much to his character, but it's a funny mental image. I believe there was even an early battle report for Age of Sigmar, where he killed Be'lakor. Which is
wow.
Him and some other skinks dropped enough rocks on his head that he got back.
Say my name. I dare you. I dare you. Say my name. Go on.
It's a very funny, very little funny occurrence. It's so goofy. And then there's there's a little subspecies of skink. Chameleon skink. They're chameleons, so they blend in with the surrounding land around them. They use the blowguns the most, and they're pretty damn stealthy when they need to be, as you would imagine. They'll run to the jungle, they'll hide, they'll spit back out at you, they'll come out. And they have one special character of themselves, Kaldor Drago.
Huh?
There is a lizardman, a skink, a chameleon skink named Axolotl, who was trapped in the warp for several thousand years, just ruining the Chaos God's plan, going about murdering demons, murdering more demons and demon princes.
I see.
And every now and then, he just shows up outside of the warp for a bit, much like Kaldor Drago, helps out the lizardmen, and then back into the warp he goes to wage his one-man guerrilla war against all of chaos.
He's just your friendly, interdimensional neighborhood lizardman. He just appears when he needs to fight crime. It's fine.
Yep. He's a cool dude. Once again, his campaign is very mediocre in Total War because the CA hates the lizardmen apparently. But what are you gonna do? And then we get to the last major subspecies of lizardmen, Kroxigor. Their job is to be like the big dumb laborers. So the skink do the technical work of building a city. Kroxigors are giant alligator people who they move the blocks around to get the buildings built, all that stuff. On the battlefield, it's a giant 10-foot tall crocodile monster. That's very few things they can't kill.
Yeah, I can imagine you're in the front lines of the Empire, you got your little musket, you see that and you go, nope, I'm going to run away. I need more than one bullet to get rid of that thing.
I think they even cause terror, so that is a gameplay mechanic that the soldiers look at and go, no, I'm good. I'm out. Have fun.
I don't blame them.
I wouldn't want to be fighting that either. I'm just going to be straight up. I think I would run away too. I know my place, and it's not fighting the crocodile monster.
We'll hide behind Gotrek and be like, you, help, please.
Yeah, Gotrek will deal with it, no problem. That's Gotrek. Their special character is Nakai the Wanderer. So CA did a bit of a rewrite, both of his lore and Kroxigors in general. They used to just always be big, dumb, stupid crocodiles that need to be tugged on basically a leash by the skinks.
Yeah, makes sense. They
got kind of made a bit more similar to the Saurus, which is that as they live longer, they gain actual intelligence and become personalities. Out of all the lizardmen, the Kroxigor are the ones that are the most like what you were kind of saying earlier. It's they don't have any personalities. They're big dumb croc lizards. They come out and they hit things, and that's kind of it. As they live longer, though, they can become smart enough to lead armies and generals. And the same is for Nakai the Wanderer. He's another albino lizardman, this one a crocodile. And he's a bit of an oddball, that one. So one day, he kind of just started wandering on his own after a battle. And he has a habit of showing up either in the middle of a great battle or right before one. So he's kind of like a good and a bad sign for the lizardman, because on the one hand, he's an absolute monster. He's almost unstoppable on the battlefield. On the other hand, if he's showing up, something's about to go down, and you probably don't want to be around for it.
Yeah, just you're fighting a battle. It's there's a big freaking lizard thing. Whose side is he on? I don't know yet. Oh, yeah. God. Please be against them. Please be against them. And just the Skaven going, what's that? Oh, it's fighting for us. Oh, that's weird. Oh, well. Whatever.
Usually just helps.
But you know how you said the lizardmen are you need to be where you're supposed to be. I guess they don't follow that rule for themselves of oh, no, we're doing anything we do is to the plan. So it's okay that he wanders or I wander and I go over here. It's fine. Yeah. Is that kind of the...
They're like repo men. It's it doesn't matter where they're at. Yeah. They're here to put your stuff where it belongs.
The guy just knocking on your door I've come to collect. Oh, God.
I mean,
big scary crocodile deck collector.
Probably very effective at it. I wouldn't refuse him. So, eventually he gained sort of a following, an army of his own, not through any intent. People just started following him around. He doesn't really complain, but the key thing is you need to keep up with him, because I don't think he ever really rests.
I like that you instantly made me think of the scene from Forrest Gump where he's just running and they're like, why are you running? He's just I just like running. That's what he does. And people start following him for some reason because they think there's some grand scheme to it all, and he's doing it, and he's just I'm pretty tired, and he stops running, and they're like, now what do we do? He's
probably
he just was
home.
Running for a year. Yeah, go home.
It's like that, yeah. Except he's always running to battles.
Yeah, yeah. It's a bit more violent than Forrest Gump.
I'm sure he also got shot in the butt once, too.
Yeah. See, there's a film you've seen. It's
I
perfect.
have.
Brilliant.
I've actually seen Forrest Gump.
Hey.
I think I saw it in like a waiting room for a movie that I was waiting. I think it was an entire family medical visit day. When you have 4 siblings, that's quite the long time.
Oh, wow.
So I got to watch all of Forrest Gump.
Nice.
But hey, good movie. It kept made the hours go by quick. Yeah, that's Nakai the Wanderer. He's a bit of a mysterious fellow, but he's smart. He's a wrecking ball, and he knows the Gator death roll, as all Kroxigors do. So they're quite deadly on the battlefield.
Nice.
Before I move on, a couple fun facts about the Lizardmen. Obviously, you can see the image. Dinosaurs. They have dinosaurs. They all have like names, like the T-Rex is called Carnosaur. Let's be honest with ourselves. That's a T-Rex. Stegosaurus, all that kind of stuff. They've got.
It's a copyright distinct dinosaur. Okay, Indeed. It's copyright distinct.
We don't want the Cretaceous period suing us.
Heaven forfend.
Yeah. I don't remember the name of it, but there's one that's also it's like the biggest model in Total Warhammer. That is a just giant alligator. It was also a Forge World model, so it was very expensive. And if you play that on the table for top, it was probably killing anything in its path. No, probably about it. It was killing anything in its path.
Just eating Archaon, like, nom, done. Like, whoa, that was quick.
Nice special character you got there. Unfortunately, giant lizard. They drove the dragons out of Lustria. The T-Rexes. So if you've ever, your inner 5-year-old, T-Rex beats dragons. Warhammer Fantasy confirmed it.
That's brilliant.
That's actually why the dragons don't really like the Lizardmen too much. It's because they warmed the planet up, which the dragons liked it nice and cold, so that was a problem 1. Problem 2 is, when they tried to fight back, they all got eaten by T-Rexes.
They are our apex predator. We don't like them.
Yeah, none of this T-Rexes were scavengers nonsense in Warhammer Fantasy. The T-Rex is given the respect he damn well deserves. They are right proper.
He's a hungry boy, and he's got some rather nice teeth. Yum, yum, yum.
That's also next fun fact. One of the reasons some people in Warhammer Fantasy who aren't like in the know about the Lizardmen, which is most people, think they're like chaos, because they think they're kind of like a subspecies of beastmen, because they're giant lizard people who look like they're lizard men. Not too far of a leap if you're not in the know to make the assumption like, man, that's a funny looking beastman. They're of course not. They're fanatically devoted to fighting chaos, but a lot of people think they're beastmen, and their complete and utter hostility to anyone who sets foot on Lustria doesn't really give them a chance to correct these presumptions about the Lizardmen. What else? Thanquol, good old Thanquol, was once allowed to return back to Skavenblight by Mazda Mundi, who, as a reminder, hates the Skaven more than he do demons, because he saw the future and realized that Thanquol would be more of a threat to the Skaven than he ever could be to anyone else.
He'll do more damage, with that thing they said about, was it Churchill? He's just like, oh, Hitler's doing such a bad job leading the Nazis. It's basically the same, like, no, we shouldn't assassinate him. He's doing more damage than we ever could. Yeah. Brilliant. And it's like, that's the equivalent.
And not only did he let him go, he gave him like favorable winds so he could get back to Skavendom even quicker, so he could start being Thanquol.
Get to work quickly, my friend. You've got a lot of Skaven to kill.
Yes, the Horned Rat needs you. I like to think he's got a bit of a sense of humor, because that is very funny. But either way, just a very funny fact. Also, as I mentioned, a lot of them have pun for names. The Lizardmen mounts, however, take a different way of naming, like Krokgar, right? Yeah, Krokgar. He rides a T-Rex, right?
Uh-huh.
The Lizardmen mounts of special characters are named after the Dinobots from Transformers.
Amazing. That's cool.
Krokgar's mount is Grimlock.
Amazing. Is there a star scream, please?
I don't think there is not a star scream, unfortunately. I wish there was. But I know there's Grimlock. There's a couple of others off the top of my head I don't remember the name of. But I just love that. Like, the Lizardmen are
That's kind of neat.
It's like one of those, like, the last holdovers from, the original days of Warhammer when everything was much goofier. It's like every now and then you get a little pun or joke for a name that sticks around. It's like, I like that.
What's that one called? That one's called Optimus Prime. Wow, that's an interesting Warhammer character. Like, oh yeah.
What's that Inquisitor name? Like Obi-Wan, Sherlock, Clouseau, or whatever the fuck his name is.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, that's interesting original character you've got there, GW. Oh, good stuff. But any questions before I move on to End Bad?
Not really. I mean, to be honest, I'm having a whale of a time learning about all the weird little intricacies about the Lizardmen, and they sound fun. And they say Bok, so what more could you want?
They do say Bok. It's their war cry. Well, what I would want is to not cover the end times, but unfortunately, Warhammer Fantasy must always end in the end times. Well, not always, but 90% of the time. So we begin the end times. The first book is Nagash, so the Lizardmen don't really have their time in the sun quite yet. Next up, I believe, it's time for the Lizardmen, though. At least I think they were the second book. What happens is, the Lizardmen, the Slann, all kind of collectively wake up, Lord Mazdamundi especially, and declare that the great plan of the Old Ones has failed. Everything has gone to shit. There is no salvaging this planet. It's time to leave. So their great pyramids and temple cities, turns out they're also spaceships. So they begin powering and activating them. In the meantime, the Slann have set up these massive, like, anti-demon, like, barriers and fields and all that whatnot. Basically, if a demon so much as looks at Lustria, they just, like, true death. They're gone. Goodbye. So they begin preparing for the Exodus and just getting ready for either one last push, like one last hurrah against chaos, or just truly just war out. See you later. Unfortunately, much like how it originally was, only even worse, because there was actually a massive demon invasion of Lustria that went nowhere, because again, anti-magic fields. The Skaven clan Pestilence decided, we're finishing the job this time. So they, as a whole, invade Lustria and just start ruining everything. They mess up spawn pools, mess up temple cities, mess up everything they've got going for them. Lord Skrulk, the grossest Skaven ever, kills Grimlock. Grimlock, no more Dinobot. He's dead. Krotgar took exception to this and stabbed him so hard that he melted.
What? He melted just from sheer will.
Well, he was also Skaven Pestilence, so I think when he died, his willpower stopped holding his body together, and the disease.
Just like the cells of his body just went, right, we can give up, okay, and they just sludged.
It's like when a plague marine is cut off from Nurgle in the warp, so everything hits at once, and it's like, oh, I'm actually in horrible agony, and I'm dying now.
Yeah.
So he died, unfortunately. Krotgar, Grimlock is no longer around. Rest in peace. May you forever haunt Megatron, Grimlock. You were a real one. And this just kind of goes all across Lustria. And then the Skaven, not to be outdone, pull the moon closer to the planet. The Grey Seers do. And that begins causing all sorts of tectonic issues that the Slann are barely able to hold off. And then, because that wasn't enough, Clan Scryer of the Skaven, further to not be outdone, blow up the moon with the little Death Star they built on the planet.
Oh, okay. Why not? Why? Why did they blow up the moon?
I'm sure if you asked them, they would give a reason like it makes it easier to get warpstone because they pulled more stone closer, the moon that's made purely out of warpstone. If you blow it up, the chunks that rain on the planet would be easier. The real reason is Ikit Claw is a psychopath, even by Skaven standards, and just wants to watch the world burn. I think that's even his motivation in Total Warhammer for being a legendary lord. He just wants to blow things up, and he has nukes, so he can back it up. So this is when things get even worse for the Lizardmen, because most of the Slann start dying in order to hold it off. Mazdamundi even has a really depressing end. He does his best, and he destroys most of the fragments that are coming down, but the mental strain is like too much, and he starts climbing the steps of his like personal pyramid, so he can feel the wind on his face one last time. Except he gets killed before he can make it to the top, which is just really depressing. I don't know why GW needed to add that bit of lore to the Lizardmen.
This is like the dagger's already in. Let's just twist it a little bit more, and he's gone.
Like
enjoy.
He's already dying. Just let him climb back up to his stairs and enjoy like.
Let him do an Arthur Morgan from Red Dead 2.
Exactly.
It's just like, oh, lovely. Not like is this not like and then someone stomped on his head in the last minute. Like that would have sucked. Like no, do it properly. Go on.
It's like his dying wish wasn't even like one last ritual to fight chaos just one last time. It was, I just want to feel the wind on my face again, and he gets killed before he can. After that, Lord Croak, I mentioned him a little bit earlier, the fella who died but just decided he wasn't. His spirit had always been hanging around his body, and that's kind of how the Lizardmen used him. If there was a big enough battle, they would just cart him out, and he would just blow up the enemies. He simply decided that death was no longer an option, and so he was alive again. Not like Nagash, where it was necromancy, so there was some pretty foul stuff involved. Not like the Emperor, who for a variety of reasons can't do that. He just decided, I'm not dead anymore, and he wasn't. He was alive again, because first generation Slann were a bit busted.
That was great. I just like the idea. It's like, oh, death is unacceptable. All right, that's sorted. Like, wow, how'd you do that?
It was just
not going to
like,
explain.
He just willed himself back. He's like, no, I'm no longer dead. So he comes back.
He did that. He did that thing that like 14-year-old boys do when they're playing games. It's like, you're dead. Nuh-uh, I'm not dead. Because they want to win.
Yeah. So he comes back to lead, make sure like the Lizardmen are able to leave. Him and what few Slann were left diverted the fragments of the moon they couldn't destroy onto Lustria, so the rest of the world wouldn't be obliterated. And then I believe him and the remaining Slann all get on the spaceships and they just leave. The Lizardmen they're just gone now. Not exactly the coolest thing, the most bro tier move. I bet they probably could have helped at Middenheim, kept the world from ending, but I also can't fault them for not wanting to be a part of the end times any longer. Not everyone made it, of course. I think Krotgar might have made it because he was ordered to one of the Exodite sites. But most of the other special characters die. Actually, Oxalotl, I also don't know if he dies. Oxalotl doesn't get too many mentions. But the last, I believe, like, thing of note the Lizardmen do is an Akai the Wanderer and Gorak. It's, again, one of those moments in the end times. It's like, this all sucks, but this is at least a cool moment. Gorak is just at one of the major temple cities known as Itza. He's just fighting wave after wave after wave of Skaven. It's like Sigismund at the Siege of Terra, where it's just like, he's just a brick wall that anytime someone tries to fight him, you're just dead. It's like that, but with rats instead of traitors. Like just thousands of Skaven personally by himself until he's the only one left, and they still just can't get past him. And right as it looks like he's about to die, I believe it's a bunch of like the Storm Fiends, the rat ogres with guns, Nakai the Wanderer comes out and then bashes their head in. So
nice.
That's the two albino lizards back to back, just until they create a literal mountain of corpses out of the Skaven.
Just like that. The power of albinism. Yeah! Damage!
And I think the last scene, this is in none of the books, I think this is one of Josh Reynolds answered what was happening. And the last thing they ever do is the last scene of the Lizardmen in Warhammer Fantasy is as the moons are coming crashing down on them, it's Gorak screaming at the heavens as Skaven and rocks surround him, and he goes down swinging. Which, you know what?
Nice.
If there's an end to the Lizardmen, I'm glad it was that. They went down swinging. And unfortunately, that is the end of the Lizardmen in Warhammer Fantasy. But
Wow.
they're not gone.
Hey!
Age of Sigmar. Turns out there's a lot of retconning to be done here. Initially, what happened was those temple ships kept going until all of the Lizardmen on them just died out, just after countless eons of just floating through nothing. Until I think it was only like 5 Slann remained. And they recreated the Lizardmen from memory into basically being demons of order. They were guided to the realm of Azir, which is Sigmar's home as well. It was the closest, it was the best fit for what they wanted. And they had their couple spaceships they were in, and from there they would basically send down bolts of lightning to fight chaos. So say chaos is like, there's a chaos warband raiding some out-of-the-way town. Well, suddenly 1,000 lizards are here to take issue with that, and they would kill all of them, and they would leave. They were originally all like made of starlight, and had like Azir for blood. So they even purified chaos just by existing. Like if Lizardmen bled on you, it was like you were gonna die if you were chaotic in any way. Which is
They had holy water blood.
pretty much. It was pretty effective. As time went on, more information was revealed, which of course means GW retconned what exactly was going on here, and they kind of. Many of them did actually survive, and the Lizardmen were able to, the Slann were alive for so long, they were able to figure out, spawning pools again, how to make more of them bad boys. And from Azir, which is the realm of heavens, if you're a big fan of Lovecraft or people like Orican the Diviner and all of the stars are right, well, the Lizardmen in the realm of heavens can see the future, both through scrying machines and through just the magic of Azir. Tracking the motions of the heavens and using that to predict the future, which is how those Lizardmen now operate. They don't just look at the plan of the old ones, they actually look at the future themselves, and when that's not enough, they rewrite the future themselves, because they're still massively powerful frog people.
Wow.
So if the major battle's going down, it's time for them to show up and wreck face.
They just go, Uno reverse card. It's like,
Yeah.
no, you're losing. And they're like, wait, we are losing. How? What is going on? I don't know.
I cast Pot of Greed to draw 3 additional Carnosaurs from my deck. What I believe the current lore is, they've actually been kind of in flux. I believe they've got through some pretty major changes every edition. Some Lizardmen do now live in the mortal realms, and they terraform the surrounding landscape to look like Lustria used to. So I'll the lush jungle and all that stuff that also hates you and wants you dead if you're trespassing on it. Some of them live amongst the Lizardmen as these more heavenly beings. They're still Lizardmen, but those are more the ones that are like, they do still have like the starlight and stuff in their veins, not just blood as the ones who live in the mortal realms do. And they get sort of what is it in Dawn Wars? They get steel rain, lightning rain, lizard rain onto hot spots wherever the Lizardmen and the Slann determine they need to go. Lord Croak, of course, is still around. The end of the setting was simply not enough to get rid of him. He's built different. And, the Lizardmen are back at it. They've kind of gone through a bit of a rough patch lately because Be'lakor destroyed a bunch of their scrying devices. They used to be able to outpredict Tzeentch between the devices and just living in the heavens. Tzeentch was always 5 steps behind them, which goes to show that Order finally got an upgrade in Age of Sigmar. It's not just chaos reigns. Be'lakor kind of ruined that, but that at worst put them on an equal playing field, and they still have the T-Rexes and the Saurus. So I'm of the personal opinion it doesn't matter if the T-Rex can no longer outpredict you. Still a T-Rex, still gonna eat you.
Yeah, and his name is Michael, and it's great.
His name is Ironhide, and he's great. That's Lord Croak worked with, I know, Marathi once to stop a rampaging god of destruction from destroying a city. They couldn't kill him, so they just kind of they teleported him next to a chaos war camp and made him their problem. Which, hey, it worked. The orcs now have a new powerful ally they like to follow around, but if that's Chaos's problem, then I don't think anyone's really going to complain, Well, Chaos will, but I don't think anyone's going to shed a tear over that. And they have all sorts of new tricks. For example, they can deep strike into pools of water that are an inch thin. So suddenly lizards are walking out of the foot-deep pond that you just took camp next to, and they're probably going to kill you. They are a little bit more inclined with working with other races now, especially compared to fantasy. Like I said before, there was really just like the people on Albion who were in any way remotely quote-unquote allied with them. Anything else is just convenience. Now they're especially... Oh, what's up?
I was going to say, to be honest, their plan's kind of ruined. So they're like, right, you got any other ideas? Maybe we should try something like thinking for ourselves a bit. Oh, that might work. Yeah, let's do that.
That is true, although I ask you to hold that thought for a couple minutes.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, with Sigmar especially, because they're both bound to Azir, the Lizardman and Sigmar himself, Sigmar being the god of it. They're a bit more prone to cooperation. The ones who live in the mortal realms themselves are a bit more prone to like fits of rage and isolationism than the ones who live in Azir. So if you trespass on their grounds, they're probably going to kill you regardless of what god you're following. But the ones in Azir, they're happy to work alongside like the Stormcast, the Lumineth, all the Order-aligned Age of Sigmar factions if the Slans say you got to work with them. There's one bit of lore, I believe, where chaos was, doing its thing, ruining everything, and then the stars were rearranged in the face of a grinning frog, and then the Lizardmen came and ruined their lives and just killed all of them.
Oh, amazing!
So the Pepe meme is canon to Age of Sigmar.
Oh dear!
It's I just love that bit of lore. It's the stars are right, except it's fucking Pepe the Frog looking down at you. Oh, nice. And I know you said it's time for them to follow their own initiative, and to be fair, they are much more proactive and on their own now. But I believe I've read online that there are some hints in the lore that at least some Lizardmen, some Slan, believe that the Warhammer world exploding, the Slan in the Old World declaring the Great Plan had failed and them all leaving, was itself just part of the Old One's master plan.
Oh, yeah. Oh, dear.
Naturally. I don't quite know how I feel about that, because on the one hand, it's like, really? The Old Ones predicted all that? But
it's kind of like those, is it Harold Camping, like the reverse Doomsday, where it's like, oh, it's not that we're trying to predict Doomsday, we're trying to predict not Doomsday, and we got it wrong, but no, now we've done the changes in the calculation.
Yeah.
The salvation is actually this state, and we have to do these things. It's like, are you sure about that? I don't know.
Yeah. Which, like I said, it feels kind of... I don't think... It's not, like, certain. I read it online, so it could be completely wrong, but if it is true, it's like, on the one hand, it's like, that seems like a bit of a little bit lazy, a little bit goofy and dumb, and not in a fun way like Grimlock. But on the other hand, it's also like funny to imagine, like, Archaon shows up, like taunting Lord Croak. He's like, I blew up the world once, I'll do it again. And then Lord Croak like just turns a plaque around that shows Archaon in that exact moment saying those exact words. It's like Joseph Joestar. Your next line is, I blew up the world once, I'll do it again. But yeah, that is the Lizardmen. Unfortunately, I think in Age of Sigmar they do have much less special characters, which, from a narrative standpoint, obviously not as fun. But for what it's worth, Age of Sigmar is still relatively new in terms of how long the other Warhammer settings have been around. And it makes them a lot more versatile as an army in a war game, It gives more room for, your armies, your dudes to take the spotlight rather than always just picking the special characters and going nuts. But that is the Lizardmen. They've, unlike most of the other factions, they've largely survived unscathed into Age of Sigmar. Like Krokgar, he's now just a generic general unit. He's not Krokgar. His model's like just a dude. But, those models are still in. All the old Lizardmen models were still in. To my knowledge, the only ones that aren't still in the game are those that have been updated. So it's the same model, just looks better. I think the only other factions you can really be lucky enough to say that are Chaos and the Skaven, who are technically part of Chaos, but the Skaven are the Skaven. I refuse to believe they're part of Chaos. They're their own thing. But yeah, that would be the Lizardmen. Are there any final questions you have?
I suppose the main thing is they're very much one of the more enigmatic of all the factions in Warhammer Fantasy, from what I can tell. So, I mean, they're obviously very cool visually and such, but is there a good starting point in the books for fans who are like, oh, I really like this faction? Is there a good place to start uncovering some of their lore if they don't have anywhere to start?
I will admit I'm not as familiar with Lizardman lore as I am a lot of the other factions. But if you were looking to start, I would say look for a PDF of or PDF or an old copy of like an old army book from Warhammer Fantasy. Those would of course have plenty of lore. Unfortunately, the tabletop rules probably won't help you out too much anymore. But the lore is still there. They're kind of like the Tyranids. They're more mentioned a lot, but because like so many of them are just like this, they're so driven and they're all given a purpose, and that's all they really do. It's a lot harder to make books out of them.
And there aren't really many characters because they're all automatons. Like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
we can't really make a book about this like robotic race of scaly people who have no personalities as such. Like, oh, that'll be a fun read.
Yeah.
Lizardman 1 went over to Lizardman 2 and said, Bok. And Lizardman 2 said, Bok. And then they killed a bunch of Empire. And then Lizardman 3 went, Bok. And then the other one said, Bok. It's like, this is a very drawn-out book.
And then he ate his Bright Wizard like a Slim Jim. But there's the Temple of the Serpent, which I believe is the second book in the Thanquol trilogy. It's all about Thanquol going to Lustria. And it is a spoiler alert, but look, the setting's gone. I don't know what to tell you. That's where Thanquol was sent home by Mazda Mundi to go be the Skaven's problem again.
Your road trip is over. Go away.
Yeah. And if you have a PC and are down to play it, Total Warhammer with the Lizardmen gives you a lot of lore blurbs. All the research and all the unit descriptions and whatnot do have little bits of blurbs and lore. Some of the landmarks that the Lizardmen can build to give you like unique bits of lore, like, hey, this city is important for this reason, because Total War did a lot of expanding on the Lizardmen lore. Not too many rewrites and stuff like that, like with the Croxagore, but they did do a lot of like expansion, because like I was saying, the Lizardmen have plenty of lore as like an army, but also it's like they're very much closer to like a war game side of things than just being character driven, because again, biological robots, only so much they're going to be able to do with characterization and stuff. But yeah, that would be my advice for the Lizardman lore. Total Warhammer Army books, if you can find any, or find any PDFs online. And, of course, the Thanquol book. And that's a joy to read because it's Thanquol anyways. You don't need a reason to go read about Thanquol. That's the only reason you need. He's a goofball. But, yeah, I believe that was the basics of the Lizardmen. A little bit of everything. You got overpowered magic users, you've got space marines but they're lizardmen, you've got little chameleons, and you've got gator death rolls.
You got transformer dinosaurs. That's great.
Transformer dinosaurs. Oh, they also have orbital lasers. I need to get that in.
Oh, nice. Awesome.
Yeah, the lizardmen, sometimes I feel like
they're built different.
They forget they're in a fantasy setting and just decide you're getting lasered now. Such is the power of the old ones. What can I say? But yeah, and of course, as always with Fireside Fantasy, there is much about them. Even though I said there's not too much in lore, I didn't cover every single bit in blurb. There's always, if you want like specifics, like I said, you can find more information in those series, like those books and the army books and Warhammer Total War. This was just a nice little coverage of the Lizardmen. Probably more thorough, pound for pound, than other factions, just because there's not too much about them compared to everyone else, but if you look for more, you can still find some.
And I would say to anyone watching at this point, let us know in the comments about any other factions you'd like us to cover, because there's still quite a lot to cover, I suppose. And we've had a lot of fun with we did like the overview ones with Age of Sigmar and the world. And now we're doing factions, and they're quite fun. Like dwarves was a lot of fun. This was a lot of fun. So, and we did Skaven on the podcast itself. So, let us know if you have any particular faction you're burning for us to delve into, because there's still a lot to cover. I'm sure Colin could probably do about 10 hours on the Eldar, or elves, I should say, on the elves.
Oh, I could. I'd be more than happy to talk about them. I managed to mention them here, and by God, I will do it again.
How many episodes do we need? Like 3 episodes of that?
It depends on what we want to talk
Maybe.
about. we'll have to see.
Yeah. Other than that, I suppose, any other final points you want to say about the Lizardmen?
Don't encircle them, because it just means all the Lizardmen are able to fight at once. And they'll pull out an American general's hat and talk about now we can attack from any direction.
Going back to that video, brilliant. Bok, bok, bok. I hate Soros. I hate them.
Bok is also the Bank of Oklahoma. I hate they made me Google Bok so I could find more things to complain about.
Well, either way, I guess we'll wrap it up then. So, thank you everyone for watching. We had a lot of fun talking about the Lizardmen. Let us know about what you want us to talk about in the future, and we'll catch you on the next one, I suppose.
Take care, everyone. Have a good one.